biggest missile threat wasn't coming over the horizon, but, well, down from orbit, silently circling above us.
It sounds a bit like science fiction, doesn't it? But the Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA, they're actually putting out warnings.
Warnings about China, specifically.
Yeah.
Developing nuclear missiles that could strike from space.
Yeah, and it forces a real rethink. We've spent decades focused on air, land, sea threats,
Exactly. But this idea, Fractional Orbital Bombardment Systems, or FOBS, it adds a whole new unsettling dimension.
A totally different strategic challenge.
Right. So for this deep dive, we're digging into those DIA warnings, mainly through the lens of reporting by the Eurasian Times. We'll look at this potential shift, its history, the U.S. reaction, and this ambitious counterplan called the Golden Dome.
It's a really significant development.
Definitely. And if you're tracking national security, strategic competition, maybe you're a UPSC aspirant, or just concerned about global affairs, this is, well, pretty essential stuff.
Our aim here is really to break down these reports, give you the context you need for understanding what's quite a complex and potentially game-changing situation.
Okay, let's start with the threat itself. This FOBS capability China might be developing. What exactly is it for anyone new to the term?
So the DIA basically defines it as a kind of ICBM, an intercontinental ballistic missile. But instead of just that big high arc, over the pole, it actually goes into low Earth orbit for a bit.
Low Earth orbit.
Right, and then it deorbits, re-enters the atmosphere, and heads for its target.
And the key difference is how it gets there.
Exactly. Several key differences, actually. If it flies the same general direction as a normal ICBM towards the U.S., the flight time could actually be shorter.
Shorter warning time?
Potentially, yes. But maybe the bigger worry is the path. It could travel over the South Pole.
Ah, okay. Because our radars, our warning systems, they're mostly looking north, right? Over the Arctic.
Precisely. That's where we've traditionally expected ICBMs from Russia or China to come from. A South Pole approach. That could be a major blind spot.
A fundamental challenge to how we watch for threats. And it's not just the direction, is it? There's more unpredictability.
Absolutely, because the warhead can basically drop off at any point in its orbit. That makes predicting the actual attack path incredibly difficult until maybe the very late stages.
Which makes it much harder for missile defenses, for tracking systems.
Much, much harder, yeah. Less time to react, less certainty about where it's even going.
And the DIA has put some numbers on this. The Eurasian Times mentions projections.
They do. They project China could potentially have up to 60 of these FOBS missiles by 2035.
60, and Russia.
Maybe around a dozen for Russia is the estimate.
But it's important to stress this isn't something deployed now, right, by anyone.
That's a crucial point. No country has a fully developed, deployed FOBS capability today. This is about a potential future threat.
But one the DIA is clearly concerned about the development path for.
Yes. And they also note it's not just for nuclear warheads. FOBS could potentially carry conventional payloads too.
Which broadens the whole strategic picture beyond just nuclear deterrence.
Definitely.
Now, this idea, missiles from orbit, it feels new, but the Eurasian Times piece mentioned it's actually got some history.
It does, yeah. You have to go back to the Cold War. The Soviet Union actually developed and even deployed FOBS systems back in the 1960s.
Really?
Deployed?
Yes, the R-36O missile system. Their thinking was pretty similar to the concerns now trying to get around U.S. early warning radars focused on the North Pole.
So, trying to find that strategic gap even back then?
Exactly. It was operational, reportedly, from about 1968 to 1983.
So what happened to it? Why did they phase it out?
Well, arms control happened. Treaties like the Outer Space Treaty of 1967, which banned weapons of mass destruction in orbit, and later SALT II in 1979, put limits on these kinds of systems. They were eventually phased out.
Huh. So, a Cold War concept potentially being revisited, which brings us to China's test in 2021 that the Eurasian Times highlighted. What went on there? Right, that was a big moment. In summer 2021, China launched a Long March 2C rocket. Standard stuff. But the payload, that was different. It carried a hypersonic glide vehicle, an HGV, into low Earth orbit.
An HGV into orbit.
Yes. And the vehicle apparently completed at least a partial orbit, then re-entered the atmosphere, and then maneuvered at hypersonic speeds towards its target area.
Okay, wait. Hypersonic speed and maneuverability after coming out of orbit? That sounds Really
So
advanced.
it's pretty unprecedented, combining HGV characteristics, high speed, maneuverability, with that fractional orbital trajectory.
Yeah.
That's a potent mix.
Yeah, because it's not just coming from an unexpected direction. It can also dodge and weave on the way down, making it even harder to hit.
Exactly. Extremely difficult to track, let alone intercept.
And the U.S. reaction, according to the Eurasian Times, was pretty strong. Officials seemed quite alarmed.
They did. You had Lieutenant General Chance Saltzman kind of highlighting the ambiguity, sometimes called hypersonic missile, sometimes suborbital. It blurs the line.
Makes it hard to categorize, hard to counter.
Right. But maybe the strongest words came from General Mark Milley, who was chairman of the Joint Chiefs then. He called it a very significant event, very concerning. He even used the phrase Sputnik moment.
Wow. Sputnik moment. That really signals the level of surprise and potential strategic impact.
It does. It suggests a technological leap by a competitor that catches you somewhat off guard and forces a major reassessment.
And the core worry seems to boil down to time, doesn't it? Decision time. Faster, less predictable attacks just shrink that window for response.
Fundamentally, yes. And this potential Chinese FOBS capability, it's not happening in isolation. The DIA projections, as the Eurasian Times lays out, show a much broader missile buildup.
Right, let's touch on those wider forecasts. What else is the DIA seeing out to 2035?
Well, for China, they see a big jump in nuclear ICBMs, maybe up to 700 from around 400 now.
700 ICBMs.
And submarine-launched missiles, SLBMs, also growing significantly, maybe from 72 now to over 130.
And the hypersonic numbers you mentioned earlier were huge.
Yeah, the projection for China's HGVs is up to 4,000 by 2035. That's up from maybe 600 or so now.
4,000.
And the report even notes China might already have a conventional HGV that could reach Alaska. So some of this isn't just future speculation.
And Russia, also expanding.
Also projected to increase, yes. Maybe up to 400 nuclear ICBMs, SLBM numbers staying roughly level, but HGVs increasing significantly too, perhaps to around 1,000.
So you paint this picture of an accelerating, diversifying missile threat. What's the U.S. response? The Eurasian Times mentions this Golden Dome idea.
Right, the Golden Dome. It was launched, formally at least, by an executive order back in January. The stated goal is massive. A missile defense shield to protect the continental U.S. from all missile threats.
Right.
Ground, air, sea, and space.
All threats. And while it doesn't name names in the order, the assumption is it's aimed at China, Russia, North Korea, Iran.
That's the general understanding, yes, given their capabilities.
And the architecture sounds futuristic, very space-heavy.
Very much so. The vision involves layers of satellites for tracking, space-based radars, potentially even interceptors based in orbit to hit missiles in their boost phase.
Boost phase interception, the holy grail for missile defense, right? Hit it when it's slow and hot.
Exactly. And there's even talk of directed energy, lasers, potentially down the line. The Space Force would obviously be central to operating all this.
Did the Eurasian Times mention any specific programs being pushed for this?
Yes, the executive order specifically backed two key satellite constellations. One is HBTSS, the Hypersonic and Ballistic Tracking Space Sensor.
Designed for these fast maneuvering threats.
Right. And the other is PWSA, the Proliferated Warfighter Space Architecture. Basically, a big network of smaller satellites in low orbit for resilience and better coverage.
So it's not just space interceptors. It sounds like multiple layers.
That seems to be the concept. They talk about underlayer and terminal phase intercept capabilities, too.
Yeah.
So maybe improving or integrating with existing ground-based systems like our current GMD interceptors to get multiple shots at an incoming missile.
GMD being the ground-based mid-course defense.
Correct.
Okay, it's a huge vision. But the Eurasian Times also suggests it's, well, still a bit vague, lacking concrete details.
That seems to be a major point. Figures like Representative Ken Calvert have pointed out that a clear, detailed blueprint for Golden Dome isn't really there yet.
So lots of questions about how it all fits together, what technologies are truly feasible.
Exactly. Scope, tech, integration, lots of unknowns.
And the cost. The Eurasian Times mentioned some eye-watering figures being thrown around.
Astronomical, potentially. There was a proposed $24.7 billion boost in defense spending bills related to this area. But the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, did an estimate suggesting just the space-based interceptor network could cost up to $542 billion over 20 years.
$500 billion just for the space interceptors.
Potentially. It highlights the sheer scale and expense of what's being contemplated.
So Golden Dome, a bold response on paper, but very much a work in progress with massive costs and feasibility questions still hanging over it.
Absolutely. And it really shows that classic action-reaction cycle in military tech, doesn't it? A new perceived threat like FOBS emerges, driving huge investment in new defenses like Golden Dome. It's the dynamic of strategic competition playing out.
Right. Okay, let's try and pull this together. Key takeaways from our deep dive based on that Eurasian Times reporting. We've got China's potential FOBS capability, a really significant new type of threat, harder to track, potentially bypassing existing defenses.
We look at the Cold War history, the Soviet system, showing the idea isn't totally new, but the tech now is different.
We covered that 2021 Chinese test, the HGV combination, and the serious U.S. reaction, that Sputnik moment, concern about falling behind or being surprised.
And we placed it in the broader context of rising missile arsenals globally, according to DIA projections.
And finally, we looked at the U.S. response, this ambitious, incredibly expensive, and still somewhat undefined Golden Dome space-based defense concept.
Understanding all these moving parts is just vital if you want to follow modern strategic competition, national security debates. Crucial context for, say, UPSC aspirants, but really for anyone wanting to understand global power dynamics.
Absolutely. Which leads us to maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to ponder. Considering these immense technical challenges, the frankly staggering potential costs of something like Golden Dome, what are the most effective, maybe the most sustainable ways to ensure security in this evolving threat landscape?
Is it purely a technological arms race? Ever more complex shields?
Yeah.
Or do other approaches, maybe diplomacy, arms control, need more emphasis alongside defense?
It's a huge question. Finding that balance between deterrence, defense, and diplomacy.
Indeed.
We'd genuinely love to hear what you think about this. Drop a comment below with your thoughts or any questions you have. And please do like this video and subscribe for more deep dives like this one.
And just to reiterate, our discussion today drew heavily from the reporting found in the Eurasian Times. We definitely recommend checking out their work if you want to explore this further.